45 years ago, on Saturday, August 1st, 2026, this singer had a number one hit called Jessie's Girl. Hi there, it's Michelle. Welcome to my channel. As I showed you in my intro, on Saturday, August 1st, 2026, it was the anniversary of Jessie's Girl hitting number one on the top 40 charts. And today I just want to share a little story, or maybe a couple of stories, about how my love of Rick Springfield developed. And it started with that song. And so I wanted to share a little bit from my book. I wrote this book and released it in 2019. And it just shares some stories that about Rick, like the one I'm going to read to you, and then like concerts I've been to. So I thought I would start by reading the first part of the first chapter, if that's okay. Hope it's okay. So at the time when Jessie's Girl was released, I was finishing up my 6th grade year at an elementary school up in Huntington. And I had just found out my dad had gotten a job and I was going to be moving. And so let me read a little bit of the chapter here. It says, when school let out for the summer at the end of my 6th grade year in 1981, my family moved from my true hometown of Huntington to the big city of Kokomo, about a 1.5 hour drive south. We moved because my dad had transferred with his job. So he was getting a promotion and needed to move because the job he was promoted to was not available where we were living. I was not looking forward to the move at all. I had several good friends and one best friend I was leaving behind. My best friend and I, we spent a lot of time at each other's houses. She was at my house. We'd spend the nights at each other's houses. I would go to her house. She lived out on a farm there in Huntington County, close to where we went to our small elementary school together. Of course, who knew what would have happened since we were all headed to junior high? And that is true, because I was in band and none of the rest of them were. Things might have changed whether I wanted it to happen or not. You guys all know how junior high or even high school sometimes changes us because we have new interests and we go with we find new friends in those new interests that we're doing. Anyway, I discovered the radio. At this point, I've been listening to the radio quite a bit. Before we moved, I always was in my room listening to a radio station called WMEE, based in Fort Wayne. It was about a half an hour north of us. And at that time, they played a lot of the current rock and roll songs, which I loved hearing. That station is still in existence, actually, because when I was up at the lake, or when I've been up at the lake, when I go on my little trip, like the one I took and shared with you last week, I did try to listen to that station, and they've changed kind of how the music that they play, and they don't play like top 40 stuff much anymore. So, not really a station I wanted to listen to. And it makes me sad because that was like my favorite radio station when I lived up there and was a kid. So anyway, so one of my favorite songs at the time was called Jessie's Girl. It was a pretty popular song, needless to say. And WMEE played it quite a bit. I've never really paid much attention to the name of the singer, though, because all that mattered to me was the song. Who cared what the singer looked like, right? A little later, though, I changed my tune. I wanted to know more about the singer and started doing a bit of research. If I was going to continue to like music from the singer, I had to know more about him. And if you know me at all, or as you get to know me, you will know that I love learning. In fact, it is one of my, if you ever do the Clifton Strengths, learner is one of my top 5. I love learning. I love doing research. I love sharing that research with people. And I know that sounds strange because people think when I say I love to research, people look at me like, you're crazy. But it's the way we learn, right? I remember hearing Jessie's Girl sitting in the back seat of our maroon Buick as we drove to our new home in Kokomo. And at the time, it was I remember this picture in my head is as clear as day right now, all these years later. I always sat on the passenger side of the car in the back seat. And we had a 1981 Buick Century. And if you remember those cars at all, it was not a big car. It wasn't a small car. It was kind of like a medium, mid-sized car, I would call it. And we had just gotten it. We hadn't had it very long. And I remember us driving to Kokomo. And because my dad, it was a company move, we didn't have to move our belongings. They packed everything for us. They loaded it in a big semi, and we just had to drive to the house. And then they unloaded for us. So nice. All right. Where was I? I sat in the back seat and mouthed the words to the song. I actually heard the song on the radio as we were driving there. I could never sing out loud, though, because I didn't figure my family would appreciate it. But I loved that song so much. Once we settled into our new house in Kokomo, I continued spending many hours in my room listening to WMEE when I could get it on a small radio that I kept by my bed on a nightstand. At this point, it wasn't like an alarm clock, but it was just like, I kind of remember actually what this was. It was blue in like a blue and white. And it was actually more like a turquoisey blue, if I remember right, or kind of a bright blue, not like a navy blue or a royal blue. That's kind of weird that I remember that. The distance between Kokomo and Fort Wayne was greater than between Huntington and Fort Wayne. Keep in mind, I'd moved further south, so it was harder for me to get WMEE. However, Sue found a new radio station based right there in Kokomo called WZWZ that played the same kind of music. Now, I don't know if that radio station still exists or not. I've driven around Kokomo now a few times, going to the lake, but I don't think I've ever found it. And I don't, like WMEE, I don't know why, but I remember it was 97.3, I think. But WZ, I don't remember the numbers for that one. Anyway, it wasn't as good as WMEE, but it would have to do. Besides, I didn't have much of a choice if I wanted to listen to the radio. I had to listen to whatever station I could get in tune. At the same time, I was listening to music, starting to really listen to music. I started watching General Hospital. Now, we all know what happened that summer and how it built up to what happened in the fall, the Luke and Laura story. And my mom had told me that she had watched it, as well as All My Children, One Life to Live, which were on before General Hospital at the time, and had watched them, all 3 of those soaps, since I was born. And I'm skimming through some of this. While I was watching General Hospital, I kept noticing this doctor named Noah Drake and thinking how cute he was. I didn't know his real name at the time and didn't think too much about it. My parents had started giving me an allowance, which back then was like, I think $1. Now keep in mind, this is 1981. So back then things were cheap. Not near as much as they are now. It wasn't as much, like $1 a week. All right, next sentence if I'd have read it. Then again, things didn't cost as much at that time as they do now. However, the amount was enough for me to buy a teen magazine. You know, those magazines with the hottest singers and actors plastered on the cover with stories and posters galore inside. Now think 16 magazine, Teen Beat, all those teen magazines. In fact, my first teen magazine was 16 magazine. I glanced through it as soon as I got home from purchasing it, focusing on the pictures and the posters, which were pretty awesome. Later, I looked through it and actually read the articles. And when I came to a spotlight page for 2 new stars to General Hospital, I noticed this cute guy named Rick Springfield. He played Noah Drake. I finally knew his real name. As I continued reading the brief article, it stated that he sang Jessie's Girl. Did I read that right? I was in disbelief. Not only did this cute guy light up the television screen every afternoon, but he sang one of my favorite songs at the time. How cool was that? So that I could read more and more. But anyway, that gives you an idea. But I have to say, I mean, that memory, every time I think of Jessie's Girl, I think of me in the backseat of that car, driving away from my best friend and my 2 other friends. There was 4 of us that hung out together. And Jenny and I we were pretty inseparable those 3 years that we were in school together. And I have to say, though, that we did kind of keep in touch. We wrote letters back and forth. Of course, back then, we didn't have internet, so we couldn't email. We didn't have cell phones. We couldn't text. So we wrote letters back and forth for quite a while. And as we got older and got our licenses, I remember when I was up at the lake at my grandparents' house, I remember her driving up at least once, if not twice, to come visit me. And I'm thinking I might have done a couple other things. I think actually when I lived in Kokomo those 4 years, I think my parents actually drove me to Huntington when Kokomo played Huntington in football. And I hung out at the football game with them. So there was still some things going on. And as an adult then, once I got on Facebook, I stop and think, I lost my train of thought here again. I do that sometimes. Got on Facebook, and there was at one point I knew she had gotten married, and I knew her married name. And so actually once I got on Facebook, I ended up finding her, and I have not friended her yet. I should probably do that, shouldn't I? Just to see. It would be so much fun to get in touch all these years later. But anyway, I just wanted to share my story. I had told you guys at the very beginning in my very intro video that I love telling stories. And I also think I told you that when I have students in the library, they love to hear my stories. And so I feel that is something that I just like sharing. I love sharing stories. And that's part of the reason I became an author, so I can share my stories. So you will be hearing more stories from me, just like the one I've just shared with you now. And I'm sure I will be sharing more author stuff soon, I promise. But I just wanted to share this because it kind of struck a chord when I was watching TV one night, and what's my next video going to be? Why not talk about Jessie's Girl and the story, like how I became a Rick Springfield fan? So you just heard it. So if you want to hear more stories from me, please like, subscribe so that you don't miss anything. And I would love to know, if you are a Rick Springfield fan, what is your favorite song from him? Or what is maybe your favorite memory of him? That would be even cooler to hear your memory. Maybe like how you first discovered Rick. I would love to hear it. So make sure you comment below, and I will see you guys next week.